So some people in love probably don't ever ask themselves the question of, did this sort of thing happen before? Because there are definitely things I have noticed within my patterns of love, which, again, funny enough, being recorded before February 14th, that this is a whole other thing about patterns that I have noticed with my relationships or getting into relationships, to say. So I'm sure people probably have those as well that are probably watching that don't know that they probably had patterns of certain things until either they realize it too late or they still continue to fall into these patterns not realizing it. But I would say that it definitely has been a recurring pattern for me as far as a lot of my relationships have gone. Currently, I'm not in one as of the making of the video and haven't been in one for a good 3 years at this point. Just so that we are all very clear about this because I'm currently not with anybody and I'm currently just doing my own thing. So, if anything, you're just going to be hearing a dude just ramble on about his love patterns for the time being until whenever you see all of this just end up coming to fruition in some cases. But I'm sure it'll happen at some point. I just don't see it happening right now, at least, because I can definitely say I am not ready for one, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind if it has happened because I still got my own student debt to pay off. So I'm just putting that out there and out of the way. That is going to be a main priority before a lot of other things, but once that's all done, then that would at least free me up, but that would not be for another year. And that is not the best thing to have, but at the same time, I think it's good to just do that first before, especially in today's very lovely economy that we're in, that a lot of people are clearly seeing right now is not good. I think I'm just going to do that before even remotely stepping back into the dating market to begin with. Because the dating market, in a whole other separate thing, is, in a sense, kind of fucked. So I'm leaving that there, but I'm going to at least go ahead and talk about the pattern. So I would say what starts this off, funny enough, is in high school, but not in like the earlier years. It's literally around the very end, I would say, of my senior year. And for those who are very, very kosher of all of this sort of stuff, everyone in these parties consented. That is all I have to say, and nothing more has happened. So everyone is clear before I continue on with the story. So, my last year of high school, I had feelings for someone who was just shy under me of like a grade or two, and ended up, of course, at the one point getting to ask them to go out, and they said, sure. And I was like, awesome. So I had my first girlfriend that ended in a week. And if you were confused as to why, the backstory of this first one was they were in a relationship prior and they ended up breaking it off with someone else, and they wanted, in some cases, a scapegoat or a rebound, as a lot of people really like to call it. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And when that happened, that was when I got scooped up and they were pretty much left out at that point, and the relationship only lasted a good week. And after, I think, the end of the week was when they ended up messaging and saying that they broke up via a text, which will be a very funny thing to talk about down the line, because this definitely set up what I should not be doing for the next set of relationships. So, after that one, it was within the span of a month, or yeah, it was a span of a month or so, that they then ended up dating someone in the same class as me, and I was definitely upset as well because they had said one thing that we're already graduating, and of course that is a fairly sensible thing, but to then go and date someone else who is in the same boat as me is another thing. And that was absolutely hypocritical, and I know since then I haven't talked about or said anything since then to them, and pretty much at this point it's whatever. They're in their own life, and of course I'm in mine. But to continue this bit of the story, was after a good month or so that there was another girl that was also within the same sort of caliber, the same like school, like the same grade. Is what I mean. And it was after a little bit of that went on that at that point me and her ended up clicking and we ended up getting together at that point. And that was of course around the time before school ended. And of course I had gone ahead and essentially was getting ready to graduate and pretty much get myself a little bit of a part-time job while also going through and getting a bunch of grants and trying to apply for school and everything to go where I wanted to go. And pretty much, I will say that I know doing all of that and, of course, getting a job, which, of course, is part time because, you know, having a part-time job is kind of necessary as well to get something started or to at least have some sort of income before even going anywhere. And already had that, of course had a girlfriend, and just being able to like play video games, be happy, and just essentially have that. I had pretty much all of that. And I would say a lot of things in between were a little rocky as far as in terms of their parents being somewhat involved in the relationship, but it wasn't like too overbearing. But for the most part, it was me and her. We were hanging out. We were, playing Halo, funny enough, and we were just hanging out and just, having our normal relationship type of stuff. Just like the kissing, the, PDA, all that stuff, the general sense that you would expect out of a high school relationship. And it was just before college, about a good few days, funny enough, when I was getting all of my stuff packed up, all of my like clothes and stuff were pretty much in a suitcase or packed in like bags or boxes, and just able to be ready to have them sent over. All my room furniture as well was put in like the U-Haul and everything, and we were essentially getting that ready to drive down for however many hours it took which it definitely took a good day to get over there. But besides the point, the day I think it was before I was getting ready to go, or was the week before, they had their parents get onto them and basically had said that they wanted to see how I acted in church, and that was when we had known that the line absolutely had been crossed. And I was just like, yeah, no, for one, I can't do that. I know I told my mom about it, and she was like, yeah, no, absolutely not. And she was definitely furious about it because she knew how I was because I lived with her. She knows how I act, and it's just insane from what she had said to me that was like, why does that need to be a factor to begin with? And I obviously agreed, and of course broke up via, guess what, text, because that first one absolutely set the precedent going forward. So continuing from that, we broke up, but we of course stayed friends for the time being. And of course, I was over there and chilling, having a good time, just relaxing and being able to go and do stuff in Florida weather. Which, again, if people were probably or probably not sure of from the uh, video that I had about the party, I went to Full Sail. But again, besides the point, I was over there and pretty much had smooth start for school, and then within the first month of that even happening, there was a hurricane that came through. I think it was Hurricane Irma. I might be wrong. I will have to double check, but that was like 2017. That was nearly a decade ago at this point. But the hurricane was going through, and it was definitely going to hit where I lived. So I went ahead and, with my mom and my dad, of course, at the time while he was there, we went ahead and I decided to drive all the way out from Florida. And of course, everyone else had the exact same idea. And it took me 8 hours, 8 whole hours just to get out of the state and find a hotel that was right there nearby that wasn't going to be within uh the radius of the hurricane. Did all that, went through and came back to house. And why I say this was because I did not tell her at all that I had left or did anything. And I know she was wondering if I was okay. I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. And I was trying to very much hold off from telling her that I am back in town because she was definitely still very talkative and still wanted to, you know, talk and probably even get back with me because I think we both were like the first of each other's like partners basically, as far as I am aware of. Though I believe she said she had someone else before me, but that was besides the point. I don't think it really lasted long to begin with. But for the most part, we were both essentially like each other's like first partners basically. And off of that, she was definitely wondering where I was at, if I was good, if I was in like some sort of shelter or whatever, and I had reluctantly ended up saying, I think nearing the end of the week or so that I stayed there, I had ended up reluctantly saying that I was back in town, and she wanted me to go see her, and I was like, oh god, fine, you know what, sure, I'll see what I can do. But I was definitely not enthusiastic like she was. But I went to the school. I was definitely not crazy, and I'm sure she had noticed that I was not enthused to begin with, but still got to say hi to some people that, you know, I finally made it to college. I'm, doing all this and that. It was literally just the very beginning, but I had, came back because of the whole hurricane and just had the time returning for the next couple of days. So I went ahead and just saw people that I never ended up getting to see, and then ended up going back the next couple of days. And I know as soon as I left the state line, I went ahead and blocked like the different platforms at the time that we had added each other on, and I never again got a message or had anyone like trying to message me saying, "Hey, this person's asking this and that." But I ended up like unfriending, blocking this and that on different platforms as well. And since then, didn't have anything until about a year and like some odd months later. And this one isn't a part of a pattern, really. This one's just a goofy one that I think I just include anyways. Because this one was especially goofy, knowing in hindsight what it was. But at the time, I didn't know. So the second New Year's, when I went to go and hang out with friends, with IRL friends who were still, of course, in town, in my hometown, we did party stuff. We did like truth or dare shit. The stuff that you get to do to hang out with friends and just have that sort of college life to begin with. And it was pretty neat, but at the same time, it was very goofy. But that was the first time that I came back. The second time, I had my friend who, at the time, with his now, of course, ex girlfriend, and apparently had brought her sister along. And I'm not really great with having names on there, so I will say, like, uh, with my boy and girl A being his girlfriend, and then girl B being the one who was introduced to me by both him and his at then girlfriend at the time, and ended up because it was a very similar, I guess, situation of me being very picky to begin with. That I was fairly picky with my food, and she was with hers, and funny enough, that was literally all that we had to go off of at that point, because that was the whole premise of our entire relationship at that time. Was we ate very bland, I guess, like foods, and that was that. This one's a whole other topic of discussion that I will be discussing at some other point in time. I am not going into this food rabbit hole right now unless the comments absolutely diabolically want me to go through and do this whole food like rabbit hole of mine. But anyways, continuing on, we got to hang out for New Year's with my boy, girl A, and girl B at his family's house at the time, and we ended up hanging out playing Smash Brothers. Not that kind of Smash Brothers. Don't go that rabbit hole either, because I know a lot of people who go on to anime and manga and say Smash Brothers with the whole other story. This is not that kind of Smash Brothers. We were actually playing Smash Ultimate. It was either Smash Ultimate or Smash 4. And pretty much after we got to hang out and just, have a whole Happy New Year thing, we ended up going back in my boy's car, and we drove them back to the girl A and girl B's house, which is, where they both live because they're sisters. Then I believe a little after the new year, I had ended up then asking girl B out. And of course, she said yes. And I was in my brain like, fuck yes. So, again, after college and getting ready to go and like being able to have like a whole game dev job and everything, like all that stuff essentially I had thought was being completely set up. And again, later on, knowing that was completely wrong. But at the time, I thought it was going fucking splendidly. So after that, dropping them off, I already got their phone number at the uh like it was the quote unquote double date to say the least because we got to hang out with them for a while and got that. Started texting her and I know I had to I believe I had to fly back because I usually would take flights home and then fly back and have someone from the school go ahead and give me a ride there and give me a ride back. And pretty much since then chatted a little bit, but it was definitely not the greatest because we ended up only talking very little bits and pieces. Maybe like a couple of times we'd have a call, but we would usually be super silent and it was just awkward and I was trying to find topics to talk about or to, go into her hobbies, this and that, and it felt very dead-ended basically throughout the entire bit of it because again, to premise this, the only reason that they saw both me and girl B would be like possibly compatible was because we basically had a limited food palette. That was the whole entire thing. And we had basically nothing to go off of. So I'm sure everyone already could tell in the very beginning this was a relationship set up to fail. And especially failing, it did, because by the time I was done with college and all of that, I was trying to talk with my boy at the time, trying to tell him like, hey, this is not right. And I know I had another friend that we were mutuals with, and told him literally she is only texting every other week at that point. At that stage before I was graduating, it was every other week and I was like going crazy because I thought either something happened or, you know, I just was trying to make sure everything was good or, whatever happened. Like there was no sign of life. It turned out after a little bit, I know I'd said I was going to come back and we were going to like actually try and go on a date, but it was also very sketchy to begin with too because she was also not very responsive with that on any of that at all. So I ended up at that point canceled it and ended up just basically saying again through text that uh we can still be friends, but the amount of like texting and all this stuff was just not worth trying to uphold. And I basically was just like, yeah, no, I can't. We can still be friends, but I basically had texted that I was breaking up. No response. And I still have not gotten a response to this day. So I will safely say that she has likely moved on at this point. That I don't know, but I will say before I move on to the next one where the patterns actually start to occur, um, she ended up having me as like a social status of saying, hey, I have a boyfriend from another college. And yeah, that was pretty much what was told by me from my boy via girl A at the time until, things eventually ended with them and all that other stuff. But again, whole other story. I think I have that as a topic here as well, saying that, I'll talk about what happened with him another time. But that was a whole other topic. The next story that I have is where, of course, the lockdowns took place. This was a good year plus after all, that previous relationship that I'm sure she was very heavily aware of that was done. So I knew what I had to do and was like, okay, I'll see if I can go and look into any communities. And one of those communities was if anyone remembers Ruby from Rooster Teeth, there were a lot of communities, especially some in like different corners, like VR chat being one of them. I ended up finding some Ruby worlds, and there was someone that I ended up meeting who is a very cool person as well. They ended up having a couple different things, but besides the point, met him, and he ended up bringing me to this group that did like role plays and stuff. And ever since then, there was quite a bit of people in there, and I still know one to this day that I still talk to every now and again. That's really, really cool. But besides all of that, that's where this sort of stuff starts. And I will get into that in a bit because I had also ended up meeting someone else in a different public world as well, and just hung out and did a little bit here and there, but I know they were busy doing what they were doing, and they were also in like relationships as well. And I'll at least go over this one a bit because this one's a little bit more, I would say, like personal. So I would say, just to put like a summary on it, they were with somebody and essentially moved in. Then the whole TLDR of it was that uh they broke up with them and they had to completely move back. And it sucked, especially, and I was definitely sad for them, especially at the time, because that sucked. No one ever wants to move within like a whole new state, like several hundred miles away from their home, and then be told that they don't love them anymore and that they have to move out within a fucking month is never good. And I still vouch for them. I feel bad that that ever had to happen to them. It sucked. And, you know, they managed to get through it and had one other relationship as well in between then and all of that. And which brings me back to the Ruby group where there was a specific person. I will call her, I think, I'll just say girl C because we already had girl A and girl B. I'll say girl C was another one of the few people that was within the Ruby group. And all this was, stemmed basically from just role playing for a bit. And funny enough, with the character at the time of Ruby's writing, I liked Pura. And funny enough, she does Pura very fucking well. And I was like, oh my god. But also at the time, they already had a boyfriend as well, anyways. And I think they played Jean as well, which I very rarely saw them, but whenever I did, they seemed pretty alright. But again, besides the point, they eventually ended up breaking up and had to eventually, you know, move out of their apartments as well and having to do their own thing. And I believe a little before then, I know there were definitely signs of her being somewhat into me, but at the same time, not really, because it was, I would say, in a personal sense, it was very wishy-washy, and for YouTube purposes of this portion, I will not say at all what went on, but I'm sure for anyone who might be very keen as to what I am probably about to say next is going to be very telling, but I would say as far as coming up with that on the spot, that with her and her now considered ex-boyfriend, they were doing things that you would not really be doing in front of people to begin with. And yeah, let's just say that. So I know I was definitely a bit upset as well because I thought there was still something going on until I heard that and I was like, oh, okay, I see how it is. And pretty much that ended essentially right there because I was able to read into it and know that this was definitely one of those things that I was being led on, and then, of course, nothing ever came of it. And then, funny enough, within another month or so later, that I ended up talking with the other person, which I will put as, I would say, for the frame of reference in the time frame, Girl D. So, Girl D, I talk with after, a little bit, and they ended up having like a whole relationship thing, and then that ended up ending because of complete and utter peer pressure, essentially. And then after we chatted a little bit, and of course we knew each other for a couple years, give or take, because we got to hang out for a little bit, we got to talk, do whatever, and then I believe at one point it was me and Girl D, and we ended up at one point. I know it was only a matter of time before Girl D was going to say, because that was what they had told me, that I ended up confessing first, and they ended up were planning to confess as well at some point, but we were in a private call and we couldn't sleep, so we ended up deciding to hop on VR chat and get to, hang out and cuddle and all this and that. And everything, of course, was good. And we, of course, had, one little thing because, of course, we already talked about like all the stuff, our baggage, this and that. And, you know, went through and did all of that. And I would say fast forward 6 months. I know we definitely had ups and downs with all of that, but I would say after 6 months, for me, things ended up feeling samey, to say the least. And it was something that I know was something I didn't notice well until another 6 months in, and after I got to see Girl D for the first time. And of course, we were all just excited and wanted to see each other, this and that. We got to, actually visit, and everything was going good. And I know because I needed to have a place to stay, which was at a hotel, I ended up going and having that set up and basically had myself drive down to her. So I got to drive down to Girl D. We got to finally meet, hang out, got to meet her parents as well. And me and Girl D were just having a good time. We were just watching, stuff. We were playing, doing whatever. We were able to go and do a bit of dates here and there, and especially go back at one point. And I'm going to at least say we had an attempt at, yes, this kind of Smash Brothers, but I very much had a faulty controller. Let's just say that. Let's just put that into perspective. My controller was faulty, and I was very embarrassed. And essentially, ever since then, I felt like shit. And after that, uh, went back, and I know I was definitely not great at communicating as well, because that's, again, a lot of relationships some people don't know how to say until it gets to become a sort of thing that they talk about. It's like, well, yeah, I had this, and everything gets fixed up for a bit. And then, of course, second time, I definitely ended up was in a very similar way. I was just like very, very like just more or less like not as into it. I still definitely was very, very like wanting to make sure that they were happy and all this, but I know I definitely was not doing too great. Girl D wasn't doing too great herself either, and I wanted to try to help and tried to do whatever, and of course went to my mom as well for advice, and basically she was saying that it wasn't really, I wouldn't say adding up, but it was a lot of very interesting things that probably should not be happening, I guess, and trying to do whatever is possible. I tried helping, and of course, you know, I wanted to try and do whatever, and while I was at my job at the time and ended up again texting, like I said, not a very good idea or anything of that matter to do at all. I texted saying, yeah, I think it's a little rough and I don't think I'd be able to do it. And Girl D was completely, understanding of it. And we ended up breaking that off, and we ended up basically drifting apart up until, ended up eventually removing each other, and that was that, basically. And then, funny enough, my other friend who I had met, which I will go with, I will call him Deuterino. He will know exactly who I mean if he watches this video. I will call him that, and I'm sure him knowing the video. I've seen his comment before on my TF2 video. He will know exactly who I am talking about. But anyways, he had the exact same issue with one of his other ex-girlfriends that we ended up having that exact same sort of thing happen to us. And of course, especially we bonded a lot over more on a lot of that as well, but we already bonded over a lot of stuff previously. And Deuterino was a fucking cool ass dude, and of course, still friends to this very day. But going forward with this, I have one more story, and it's already over nearly 39 minutes. So I will try to make this one as brief as possible. Anyone who knows about Never Met, uh, I don't know if anyone who has or hasn't known about this, but not the greatest place to find anybody. Let's just put it that way. But I ended up using it anyways. Probably the worst mistake again. But to begin with it, sliding and trying to find people, and of course, not a lot of misses, of course, considering, I'm a guy, and a lot of guys usually get a lot of misses. But, excuse me, whenever I ended up actually getting a hit, we ended up actually hitting it off pretty, I would say pretty well for the most part. She ended up going through and ticking quite a bit of the boxes, to say the least. But I was very careful in terms of what I was talking and, doing to begin with. And I will call this one, I would probably say girl E, and then the person that I meet later on, girl F. So, girl E that I talk with on Never Met and ended up eventually meeting while also sacrificing my own sleep because they were in another country, completely across the water and halfway across the planet. So it was already goofy trying to make time for girl E and having to do all this sort of stuff, trying to be awake in the time frame which I worked the job that I currently am at still now, that I work nights, so I was able to do pretty much whatever I could, and of course did whatever I could with my days off, and tried to do whatever I could with my days even on before going to work as well, because I wanted to try and, put time towards them, which of course is what you usually try to do for a person you really want to get with and of course keep. So that happened, but they were also a little bit, I would say, very stuck on the previous person while also trying to get me jealous for the other things that have been going on with them in their life. And I was just like, oh, cool. Yeah, awesome. Like these kind of responses, or just trying to elaborate a bit, but of course I was very, very neutral on the whole thing, and we were essentially talking for a good like month or so, give or take, like a good month, maybe 3 weeks or so. And I know we tried scheduling like dates and stuff, and first date that we had scheduled for each other, they ended up inviting someone to our lobby, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, I wasn't, too fond of it, but I didn't really care because, I mean, it's whatever. And fast forward to a little bit later, I end up doing essentially the exact same thing. And turns out she was beyond pissed. Girl E basically had a huge fit and dipped right afterwards. And then I was trying to talk to her about, what the fuck and all this and that. And then I had realized, especially, I already knew this a little beforehand, but I could definitely tell at that point she was a little crazy and definitely was trying to do whatever she could to do all these manipulative shit. And again, TLDR, I essentially had to stop responding to her and essentially find a way to block her and just get rid of her entirely. And pretty much that is exactly what I did. Is ended up blocking and getting rid of any form of contact with her. With the other friend that she had invited before, I had told him after all of that was going on, and he essentially had the exact identical thing happen to him whenever that had happened. And I was like, yeah, no, he wasn't the only one. I probably should have told him as well that there was someone before me that probably had noticed this and ended up dipping and probably blocking and deleting everything from them. And yeah, girl E was basically uh gone for the most part, but also still, kinda in some spaces. But I'm pretty sure at this point she moved on to other, I would probably say, victims at this point. But besides that, uh there was someone else that was also within that lobby of people as well that we ended up getting to hang out and do whatever with while I was in there, and we will call her Girl F. Girl F as well was the other person that was on that friends list, and I ended up, adding them, and we got to hang out a little bit here and there, but especially after a little bit, uh, with the other guy that I was chatting with about uh the one girl F, or not girl F, it was girl E. Talked about girl E with. He had told me that girl F definitely had feelings for me. And of course, as much as I could tell when she was, alone or very much liked talking to me, I could very much tell that she had feelings. And I was like, cool. I think I know exactly what to do. But the thing was, it was pretty much, let me go ahead and preface this. It was a little over a month since getting away from girl E and having all that stuff pretty much gone and derailed from there, and made it to girl F, and then eventually ended up uh making the move, asking them out, and girl F said yes. And of course, went through for a month, and within the first month, everything was pretty good up until it was the week that I went to go and see one of my VR chat friends that I had first met all the way back in 2018. Got to meet them in real life for the first time ever. And this was in 2023. And by the time that, I got to do that, I got to hang out with them and with some other friends that were also there too. And it was really, really fun. It was absolutely a blast. I would love to be able to see them again as well, like even in the future. I got to see them both marry as well, which again, another thing for another video, but I know that'll be a whole other thing as well. But I ended up was wondering when I got home after the first meeting with my VR chat friends from like the other place that they live, and I came back and was like, what's going on? Because I was very concerned knowing that girl F was not really very talkative as much and was shying away. So I was like, okay, uh, seriously, what's happening? Because it is a little concerning, and I know I talked with my friends as well, and they were like, yeah, something's up. Go ahead and just tell them. And of course, I did, and was like, let's call, because this is the thing that changed it around, and I was so happy I did it because it was a lot better than having it through a text. And I'm hoping if any more of that ever happens, I know I definitely need to be at least calling or somewhere, whether it's in person or whatever. That's at least a start. So I go ahead, schedule a call, and we call like, I believe it was the very next day, and of course, girl F went ahead and was like, I know I'm like the bad guy in this, and just basically saying that she didn't see a future at all, and understandably, I was very, very sad about it. But at the same time, I at the very least got to say to her before, I pretty much went out, was like, make sure that you communicate with anyone else in general, because that's usually not a good thing to hide it from your partner to begin with. And you really just don't want to have something that you end up not wanting to stick around with longer than you should. And I was glad at least I did it and took that initiative, because I didn't want to make her feel like she had to burdenly just keep me around while at the same time not really wanting to hang out and do stuff later on because I know that would have been a bit goofy to keep that happening. But that's all ended and pretty much left out of that. Definitely sad, but at the same time, I was not very long into like a very depressive state, but at the very least, I was like still sad that it happened to begin with. But again, it only lasted a month, and a lot of the other ones, I didn't take long at all to really get over that, which I don't know if anyone would consider it good or a bad thing. And otherwise, I would say that was like really everything. But to top this all off with each of the breakups, again, didn't really have it hit me too hard for any of them because the very first one, I definitely already had that relationship and got devastated for a little bit, but then got into the second one and I broke up and I was essentially, I would say, pretty alright, but then after having the text, not really too too keen on that. This was high school as well for the first one. The second one being with girl B, uh definitely was, I would say, very, I guess, neutral to say the least. Until then I had realized, okay, this was definitely a better decision to have just gotten away from it in general. Girl D, I had a whole sweep of relief the moment that the breakup happened. And usually that is not what should be a good thing, but for me at the time, I know it was something that I was like, yeah, I could not, you know, I couldn't try to help someone who it was very hard to try and help or to have the same things happen over and over again, hoping something would be different, I guess. But no, nothing ill will to them. It's just I couldn't do it. It was not something that I know I could have continued on for God knows how long. Because already a year and a half, that was a lot. But sadly, would only be the longest relationship that I have had out of any relationship ever. And with girl F was the by far the shortest one. And yeah, that was pretty much all of that. And of course, again, sad as a lot of those were, I would say for the most part, didn't really take me long to have all of that end up being so, like, getting over the whole thing and just moved on. And for the most part, I would say it's not been very impacting of my life. I would say not until recently, I would say, where I definitely, and I'm sure a lot of people have had, if they have not had someone for a certain amount of time, probably have had feelings of wanting to have a person and then waking up and realizing that you don't have that person and you just go back to being sad boy or sad girl hours and not having that to begin with. And yeah, it was some of those not the greatest to have, but at the same time, I've persevered as I usually try. And of course, since then, not really anything I have had to say that I have, especially anyone right now, because I'd say in the spot that I'm in, I think it's good that I'm not in a relationship at the moment because, again, to top this all off, the dating market is absolutely horrendous right now. Not really the best time, and especially, like, I would say the probably worst time with everything going around and everything going on to begin with, not the best time to be getting into any sort of relationship because of everything else. But again, that's a whole other ball game, and that's a whole other thing that I definitely will not be going into because that's not the point of what I want to do with this. I just thought I'd talk about stories and all of that. And other than that, it's mostly just because I have college debt that I am still trying to pay off. But at the very least, once that is paid off, I know I will be okay with looking again, and I know I can at least say that I'm able to essentially do what, I'd like to be able to do. I can finally go back to, of course, saving again, being able to go, okay, I can actually now allocate more funds if I need to. If I were to go and, of course, do dating ever again, but especially with what I have right now, not really the greatest to be going into dating while I am doubling down on school debt and an apartment that I have been paying on for the last 6, 7 years. Shut up. Shut up. Don't talk about it. Anyways, pretty much still paying on an apartment that I am trying to go through and pretty much pay off after I've already lived in it for a long time, or a long time ago, and still paying on it now. Still not the best feeling, but once it's all done, then I would say that would be the best allocation and pretty much all done. And then I can actually go back to having a good school life or a good like life again, then be able to actually finally try and stick my foot back in the dating pool maybe, but as of right now I'll just wait and see who comes along for the time being, because I'm still open to whatever, but I'm definitely going to prioritize myself first to begin with, because I want to be able to pay that stuff off before getting into a sort of relationship. But if anyone who I end up meeting knows and is still okay with it, then I will absolutely go along with it, and I will do whatever in my best power to make that better or to show them that after that is all done. And yeah, I would say other than that, that's it. It's been an hour of me yapping, just about, and that was pretty much the entire sort of patterns that I have noticed for myself on love. And again, funny enough, being a little before the day that people celebrate love to begin with, why not do that? Because that is something that I very much was not planning immediately, but I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm probably gonna upload this in like two separate parts because I've already recorded one. This is the second one that I've already recorded. So this one will probably be up likely within a similar time frame in some capacity. So at the very least, that'll be set up there. And for this one, this one's just going to be uploaded especially around that time of I'm, you know, working with a person who is currently doing thumbnails, which I'm sure by the previous video that you have seen is a lot more higher quality graded, but at the very, least, which sucks that I'm doing it at the end of this one, but I would like to at least give that sort of shout out for them. Let me go and find them because I know absolutely that they have been very, very nice as well. I believe I'll go ahead and say the name off of YouTube, Anster Spirits. Thank you for making these thumbnails as well, and I definitely am very glad to be looking forward to continue working with you for a while and knowing you're talented as well in all of what you do. But aside from having that whole hour rant slash story, I would say it's more of a story than a rant. But thank you so much for sticking around for a whole hour of me yapping. And I know the thumbnail will absolutely look different later on as far as this video goes, but I absolutely think that this would be a solid one to try and post first before before the day of Valentine's, or the day of, I'm pretty sure is likely what's going to happen, is the day of Valentine's Day, and pretty much just having it kind of themed in a way. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be finding this very, very hilarious in their algorithms. And I think it'll be very funny to probably even see some of the stories people might have to begin with. So anyone who has any stories in the comments, feel free to say whatever if you really feel like it, or if you had anything similar, go for it. I absolutely wouldn't mind seeing all the stories that anyone has had. But anyways, that's it for me. Thank you for hearing me yap for an hour, and I'm sure in the next one you're going to be hearing me yap for another over 40 minutes, because this one is going to be uploaded first. So I will surely see you all within the next video as well. It's going to be a double upload, but that is something that the past me did not know until now. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and thank you again to Anster Spirits for making these thumbnails as well possible. And I know this one's very, again, short notice, but I'm doing this and then the thumbnails will be updated as it goes. But again, thank you to Anster Spirits and everyone else for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.